How we doing, class? Welcome to week 1 video. First, some admin before we get started. Admin number 1, obviously you're watching a video on a different format. The first video you watched was in Echo 360. To be honest with you, I'm having a little technical difficulty, so I'm going back to my default, which is Camtasia, and this is a web link off of YouTube. Maybe this is just going to be week 1, but let's play this out. As long as you get your content, I'm kind of happy, and we'll work our way through it. Item number 2, good job on week 1 with our topic talks. This is kind of where my head's at. There were some very, very good examples. Almost all of us hit our deadline by Thursday the 19th. Normally, according to the schedule we laid out at the beginning of the semester, I am doing my video on Monday the 23rd. I just happen to be doing it a little bit earlier because I am traveling this weekend, the 21st. I'll be out of the country for 10 days. So I wanted to get this video to you. I'm coming back on the 30th, which is when our second video is due. Either it'll be up on the 30th or it'll be up on the 1st, July 1st, so you know when to expect that. Admin number 3, now that we posted our first topic talk, you are responsible for week 1 by Tuesday the 24th to respond to other students' topic talks. This is half of your participation grade as per the syllabus, so please don't forget to do that. Outside of that, I think we should get started. We're going to start off with Joe here. He had a nice topic talk. He's a good example to benchmark from. And let's see Joe's question. Joe says, the reciprocity rule seems to be based on the power of indebtedness one feels after receiving the favor. How can you dissipate this after accepting the favor to remove the psychological urge? Joe, good luck. If you accept the favor, it is extremely difficult to get rid of that cognitive dissonance that you're like, okay, know what? No big deal. Whatever. Someone did something for you 3 years ago, and you still remember it. You know, we are, from an evolutionary psychology perspective, for generations, we have been programmed to repay debts. It's this sense of fairness. It's this sense of obligation. And a word that I'm going to introduce in this chapter, which you're going to see very soon in further chapters, consistency. There's very powerful stuff here. Reciprocity is extremely powerful. A little note to self for everybody listening to this. Master networkers know about the reciprocity rule. They know it very well. Master networkers tend to do you a favor first and then call in favors later. Think about them as a set of cards. They'll hand out 100 favors, knowing that they have the ability when they need it to pull one of those back. And many times, as you saw in the chapter, some of those favors, the valiance, means the magnitude, might be higher than the original favor that was initiated. That's the power of the reciprocity rule. Now, to get to Joe's second half of his question, in the book, we talk about this Watergate example. It's in the 40s, page 40. '40, 41, 42. And what happens is this was a rejection yet retrieval kind of scenario. Because as absurd as this scenario sounds, the options that were put before the Watergate commissions were even more outrageous than this. This was the lesser of 3 or 4 obscene schemes. And they picked it. They actually picked it. They felt obligated and they picked one, even though it was a bad choice. It's terrible. I don't know if this was really a bait or switch. I think this really was framed in a rejection yet retrieval, taking the lesser option versus the higher one. You know, kind of crazy. The other term I want to introduce to you guys, based on Joe's topic talk, is this term called framing. Framing is not in Cialdini's book. And I'm not even sure it's in Made to Stick. I did a quick little check before starting the video, and I don't think it is. Framing is also very powerful in persuasion. Let me read something to you. And this is from Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow book. So pay attention. A doctor comes up to you with a cancer treatment and says, this has a 1-month survival rate of 90%. Another doctor goes up to another patient and says, there is a 10% mortality rate in the first month. Now, because the way these two questions were framed to each individual patient, patient A, a positive frame, usually accepts that treatment. Patient B, a negative frame, almost always rejects that treatment. Almost always. It's the framing of the offer, and that framing induces you to pick one versus the other. If you notice, the two choices are identical. You both have a 90% survival rate and a 10% mortality rate. One is just framed differently than the other, and because of the positive frame, we like positive over negative. We're conditioned that way. It's called framing. You guys know I love books. You know, after we read our 2 books this summer, and you have that like nice window after the semester before your fall semester starts, Predictably Irrational is a spectacular book that's perfect in line with the 2 we're reading this semester. Lots of stuff on framing here. Not surprising, Predictably Irrational, people also bought the Kahneman book and the Nudge book, which I'm going to recommend next, and there's Cialdini. Nudge is really hard. Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow is really hard to read, by the way. I would not recommend that one right off the bat. This one's a great read. Nudge is a great read. Here's Nudge, and you notice people who frequently bought Nudge also bought Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow and Predictably Irrational. So there they are. I have this Power Habit book. It's good but not great. Read other books first. Here's the Made to Stick guys in their second book, which is also quite good. And last, another book that does a lot of framing and comes right out of Made to Stick and Cialdini is Contagion. This is a great book, especially more to do with electronic media. Lots of framing in here. And not surprised, Jonah Berger. And then here's Made to Stick. There's Habit. There's Cialdini. And shortly thereafter, here's the other Chip Heath book. Love this Daniel Pink book. You know, all these things have this sort of, you know, they're very much in the same neighborhood, so to speak. I'm reading this one right now. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Joe. Framing. That's great for our journal. Throw that puppy in our journal. Tiffany with a question. Cialdini states that the requester that evokes the reciprocation rule is not the real opponent. Is this statement regarding the idea of identifying sales trickery or puffery? So we have this discussion, and we're talking about billiard tables here in this part of the text. I don't think it's trickery, and I don't think it's puffery as long as the 2 options are real. As long as there is a $3,000 pool table and a $300 pool table, you know, they may frame you to one versus the other, but as long as you have the ability to pick them both equally, and they are both real options, and then it's not trickery and it's not puffery. Puffery is when something is fake, and trickery is when you're being deceived. But reciprocity is not deception. I don't think reciprocity is deception. At least that's where my head's at. Mr. Carl, as a solicitor, what criteria should go into picking a gift to ensure that the appropriate vehicle to provide the desired effect? Now, to be honest, the gift is not as important as you might think it is, as long as it is a gift, as long as something is given. I've done a lot of survey work, and whether you put $1 in the survey for people to respond, $5 in the survey to people to respond, or $10 in the survey for people to respond, people respond almost equally regardless, as long as it's a gift. You know? And we know in the chapter that regardless of the gift, sometimes you get something even bigger back. So I don't know if criteria, I wouldn't worry about the criteria as much. More worrying about making sure you have a good gift. Mr. Daniel, one user may send a message to another person, thus forcing the feeling of an obligation for a response. Snapchat, user can decide whether or not to respond to. Slingshot, a different app than Snapchat, increases curiosity because it increases this little, you feel the need to respond because the only way you see it is if you respond. My suggestion is to go into Daniel's topic talk and read this one, because this is a very interesting topic talk, which is why I left it up this way. I'm a social media guy, so talking a little bit about Snapchat and a little bit about Slingshot is kind of neat. But this curiosity thing is coming up in your Made to Stick book. It's one of the principles within Made to Stick. It's not in Cialdini, but it's in Made to Stick. And scarcity, in my opinion, is really the power behind these kinds of 007 apps, things that disappear. And we could talk about that. That's a great topic talk. My suggestion is to go into Daniel's topic talk and make a comment, because you're obligated to do something. Leah, can Cialdini's story of the owner in the Indian jewelry store in Arizona be categorized as a perpetual contrast? The short answer is yes. And this story that we are referring to is actually in the very, 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 very beginning of chapter 1 on page 2. And I feel better talking about this in terms of frames. Now, we saw in chapter 2 this same kind of thing was happening with the guys in the suits. And he was saying $40, $42, and then he charged to be only $22, and it sold immediately, because they were framing it as one thing, and then it felt so much cheaper when it got to be the other. So it is a perpetual contrast, but I think framing is a better way to talk about that. Carla, questions for the professor. In the examples of immigration mentioned above, some individuals may feel a sense of obligation and indebtedness to a country if they were given the opportunity to be there, but others may not. Yes, because you were given this fairness or obligation to be in another country where other people did not get this feeling. So this is going to induce that obligation, that reciprocity. Does the fact that not everyone may feel indebted break the reciprocity rule? No, because reciprocity, even if you look at the experiments, it's not 100%. Not 100% take the offer, not 100% feel obligated. But it's a very, very high percentage. And the reciprocity rule is more powerful than almost any other rules to get people to comply. Lynn, questions for the professor. What is the difference between an application of game theory and reciprocity used? This is a great question. I think game theory, when I think of game theory, I think more like chess, where game theory usually is a series of moves. Where you can get people to move here, and because of this move, you move here, and because of this move, you move here. Game theory acts along more of established sets of rules. Reciprocity is more a tic-tac. In the book, we saw the phrase quid pro quo. You do for me, I do for you. And usually, after the obligation is fulfilled, the need to keep going back and forth is diminished. It's really a this, that, and that's it for reciprocity. You can keep going this, that, this, that, this, that. But that's not game theory. Game theory can push you into different directions and different maneuvers. And it's a lot more about a series as opposed to just a tick for tack. Alexis, can you explain the story of how the woman saved her life by refusing a gift and how this is an example of reciprocity? Well, the best way to avoid the feeling of reciprocity is to decline the favor before it comes in, and then there's no feeling of obligation. And this woman who was in this camp down with this suicide guy, Jim Jones, she refused him multiple times on special medicine, special food, special other things to avoid the feeling of obligation that reciprocity brings. So when it came time to drink the suicide Kool-Aid, she didn't drink it because she did not have that same feeling of indebtedness that the other hundreds and hundreds of people did, that the suicide guy, Jim Jones, kept providing the favors to all the disciples. It's reciprocity. And she didn't feel that she owed that. And when it was much easier to have her own judgment. I mean, think about this. You guys have done this at some point in your life. Someone did a favor for you, and they ask you for a favor, and against your better judgment, you do it. You go on that double date. You don't want to go on that double date. You go on that double date. You're not going to have a good time. You're uncomfortable the whole night. But you have that feeling of obligation, and you did it anyway. Well, believe it or not, that same thing applies to, I don't want to drink this suicide juice, but I love this guy, and he helped me out, so I'm just going to die with him. It's very powerful. I mean, think about the hundreds of people that died in that example. How do politicians get away in corporate... Oh, God. Politics kills me. I'm not a politics guy. They don't get away with it. It is so obvious. It is biased, and it is politics. They try to say, okay, we're going to limit the funds, or anybody that contributes a certain amount, they get written up. No one checks who does. I mean, politics is the lobbyists and the super donors and the super PACs. It's just all nuts. Note to class. Within Alexis's topic talk about pizza, Carla responded. Carla did a good job here. Carla was doing that, looking into other people's topic talks and making a response. So when you get a chance, check out Alexis's topic talk and see how Carla responded, and that's kind of what you have to do. Gisela. From what I gather, the principle of reciprocity is more self-serving than altruistic. Would you agree? I'm not sure I'm going to agree with you here. It can be self-serving, and it can be altruistic. I don't think it's an either-or. Maybe a certain lens, you may think of it as self-serving, but there's many cases where it's altruistic. So see if we can take a step back from thinking of it as either-or. Would you consider to be the societal benefits of the reciprocity principle, consider in some cases poor decisions are made only to serve the purpose of returning a favor? Well, yes, poor decisions made, lending a car out, it's getting totaled, drinking suicide potion and killing yourself, because you feel that obligation. That's how powerful the rule is. You go on that double date because because that's how powerful the rule is. We have that. It's part of our human neural net. We want that fairness. We want that obligation. So go to work, do everybody favors, so when you need something, you already have the favors out, and you can call them back in. Mr. Chris, who's watching the World Cup with me. My biggest question for you, Dr. Dano, is in situations like this at a larger, more political scale, does reciprocity have a potential damaging effect to reach a mutual outcome? It could, because reciprocity could push you into crazy situations. A lot of times when I see these deals brokered in Washington between the Democrats, I have no idea what happened with that prisoner exchange thing, but do I feel there's a reciprocity thing coming there? Quite possibly. I also wonder, after reading the text, of what your thoughts is on free samples given the outcomes by companies knowing there's a high chance that the product will still not be bought. You only hope there's enough new clients outweigh the expected costs. And yes, the costs, the new clients do outweigh the expected costs. I mean, when you think about customer acquisition, advertising is very expensive, and it's not a very good persuasive mechanism. But giving someone a free sample and having a conversation with them and putting a name and a face and a brand together is significantly better. Now, this is not easy to do when it comes to product or service marketing, because someone has to be on site or there has to be an event, and there's that going on. But when it comes to the internet, free is the backbone of the internet. You know, you may think Facebook is free. It's not free. You may think Google search is free, but it's not free. There's an excellent book by Chris Anderson. He's the author that did The Long Tail. His second book was called, guess what? Free. You know, this is the Web 2.0 universe right here. Mr. Travis, my first question is, why is there a pressure for people to repay a person as quickly as possible after receiving a kindness? Because as a human, we don't like to have debt. Debt bothers us. It does. We don't like to owe people anything, particularly in individualistic countries, which is where I'm going with the second half of this question. My second question is from a more macro outlook. Are there any societies in the world where reciprocity is not particularly important or part of a culture? And this is a great way to interject into Travis's topic talk. I don't know the answer to that, class. Go do some Google searches and find out. Now, we have individualistic societies such as the US and the UK and most of Western Europe. Okay, reciprocity is very strong in these nations. The idea and principle was tested US, Canada, and in the UK extensively in the academic articles. He's from Chicago, and he did all his stuff in Arizona and all these tests, and most of his colleagues are from the US and Western Europe. The funny thing is that the gift-giving culture and reciprocity is even stronger in collectivist societies, like such in the Far East, in Japan and China. And that's a phone that's ringing, and I should not have this in here. Sorry, just give me 1 second.
Call from Ladike Den.
Okay, very good. So, I'd love to know the answer to this, you know, because I don't know. Finally, let's wrap up with Ahmed. Can reciprocity come disguised in the form of a threat or an ultimatum? The book makes it seem that reciprocity is always done in just good faith and return favors. Is this true? I don't think reciprocity can be a threat or an ultimatum. Because then you lose the fairness and you lose the obligation. I mean, think about being at work and the idea of a carrot versus a stick. You know, bosses who use the stick and threaten you, you don't like this boss and you don't feel obligated to them. As a matter of fact, you probably do a lot of under your breath talking about this individual. He or she is not your friend. But a boss that's got your back, that does favors for you, that helps you out, you do favors for her, he or she. You do. So a threat and ultimatum, I don't think it doesn't have the same reciprocity effect. Okay? I thank you for your time. I hope I answered all your questions here. If you have anything else, you shoot me an email. I'll have access to email while I'm out of the country. And I will be following you guys up on Blackboard. And just let me know. Thanks.